The main thing that we bring out in the show and in the performance is their work ethic was second to none. We kind of compare and contrast DaVinci and Michelangelo, and the thing is, DaVinci was tall and handsome, gregarious. Everybody wanted to be associated with DaVinci, and they said he even sang beautifully and he dressed impeccably. Every minute of every day, he thought even you were performing a menial task, you should always look and be at your 100% best. Michelangelo was the total, complete opposite. They actually hated each other during the Italian Renaissance. They couldn't stand to be in the same room with each other. Michelangelo
had to be the same exhibit.
Yeah, and then exactly. And Michelangelo was disheveled and slovenly, and he actually slept in his clothes. And the reason he slept in his clothes, they didn't find out later, that the next morning when he got up, he was so full of his passion to create, he didn't even take time to change his clothes. He wanted to wake up and immediately go to his sculpting. You got to turn off these iPhones. You know, the thing that DaVinci had and Michelangelo had in their life was that they had time to think and dream and imagine and create and wonder. And that's really what we lose today.
Spoiler alert, right?
And spoiler alert. Van Cliburn, you know, Rowan Van Cliburn from Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas. He's considered the greatest piano player ever to live in the history of the world. I mean, how cool is that, right? And he's from Rowan, Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas. And he had one of the greatest quotes in the history of the world. He said, he said, if I only practice 8 hours a day, I can tell. He said, if I only practice 6 hours a day, my critics can tell. If I only practice 4 hours a day, my fans can tell. Also, one of the other things to know, with another little spoiler alert, that Michelangelo said throughout his lifetime, if you knew how much work went into all this, everything that he created, everything that he did, he said, if you knew how much work went into all this, you would never call it genius. And that is the theme of our exhibit, to discover your inner DaVinci.
The inner DaVinci. So what I ask everybody is, what is innovation to you?
Well, innovation to you is having that time to create and to explore that area that you are interested in. DaVinci would walk around the hills around Florence and Milan, and he would walk around the hills, and he noticed that there were seashells on the up in the mountains. And he goes, how in this world could seashells and these fossils get up in the mountains? And he put together in his writings, and he said, well, I bet this was once a seabed. And the tectonic plates, and they actually didn't prove that theory into the mid-50s. I mean, how incredible is that? Wow. So that's what we want to, that's the type of thing that we want to inspire.
Right. Well, I think that really fits with what we're trying to do with the innovation line. So with that, I mean, I know we have engineers here and everything like that. Someone come up and, you guys could, this is about you guys. It's not, that's the whole idea of this, is how do we have kind of a roundtable discussion?
All right, so at the turn of the 20th century, there was also a great deal of innovation and art, but art quite often, over and over in many societies, precedes innovation.
Yes.
And it's the first step out on a lot of different things, because they're challenging what's already existing, and they're looking for new things, but that inspires other people to do other things. So you had, even from Freud and the artwork that you look at the early 20th century was very innovative and very, very different from what preceded. But DaVinci was so innovative with any number of different things, but had to rely on mechanical capabilities because he didn't have any type of an engine or anything that he could use to work with.
We actually talk about that because all of his devices were very labor intensive, as you can imagine. And we even talk about this air screw that we have a replica of his model at the exhibition. This air screw, and his actual idea for it, where men were supposed to stand on this platform and hold on and literally run around in a circle and attempt to air screw up into the air like a present-day helicopter. Obviously, it didn't work. I mean, it was too heavy. It was too labor intensive. It couldn't have been. But if you just think for a minute, and we actually bring this up, that if DaVinci would have had a sustainable power source of some kind, as you mentioned, that he could have used to make and create his inventions with, you know where we would all be today, don't you?
Oh, exactly.
We'd be 500 years ahead of ourselves.
Well,
They theorized that DaVinci had now, that he had enough information in his designs for the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s and his 1400s. He had enough information, but we had to wait 400 years, 20 generations, that we could simply make what he wrote down at the time of the Italian Renaissance. He designed the original chain link, the original chain link chain that we actually had in 1966. They discovered that he designed the original bicycle. That is one of his drawings. But his problem was he couldn't make the link chain because the casting hadn't evolved that far yet. So.
And one of the things that struck me with some of the other folks who were there, even the Machiavelli and the others, was a lot of what was going on was the environment of change.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit, particularly for something like what we're doing about the environment of change and the hours? And I have to make one last comment. Do you realize the irony that without DaVinci, there would have been no blenders?
Well, that's a really interesting. What you're bringing up is how did this happen back in 550 years ago? How did this explosion of of ideas and innovation and creativity happen? To actually understand Leonardo da Vinci and the Italian Renaissance, we actually have to go back 1,000 years to the fall of Rome, when Rome fell about 476 AD. So Rome ruled the world for 900 years. It wasn't so this 250 years the U.S. has been going through is really nothing compared to the Roman Empire. When Rome fell about 476 AD, the entire knowledge that they had garnered together, the drawings, the information, the codices, the invention, when Rome fell, now that's another good trivia question. Does anybody know what happened to all that information? When Rome fell about 476 AD, the entire knowledge of the Roman Empire that they had garnered together was taken away and locked down for 1,000 years. You know whose credit will lock that information out for 1,000 years? Well, the Vatican. The Vatican locked this information out for 1,000 years. It wasn't until the beginning of the Italian Renaissance, the Medicis, rich, powerful, for their family members became popes of the 1500s. They basically controlled the papacy, and their two daughters were queens of France. They wanted to bring Italy back to the glory days of the Roman Empire, and they began to disseminate all this information that had been locked down for 1,000 years to all the artisans of the day, of which Leonardo da Vinci was one. So Leonardo da Vinci had this incredible library of information that had been locked down for 1,000 years, has now been made available, had not only allowed him to invent a lot of things, but updated all of these inventions, and he got credit for all the updates because he saw all the applications. So it was the release, really, of all this information that had been locked down for 1,000 years. And the other kind of sad part about, which was kind of thing is, when and Da Vinci wrote in his notes, he said he kept coming back with new inventions, and out of his 44,000 inventions, do you know what he thought the greatest design in the universe was? That's a great question. Us, you and me. He thought we were the greatest design invention. Everything that he did, everything that he said, and all of his inventions that you'll see when you go through at the exhibit, the application of it was to what? Was to help you and I get through our modern day, our life better and easier.
So there's actually a parallel with the current modern internet and access that we have now.
Absolutely.
With what's going on with Da Vinci and all their access of information.
Absolutely, we have to, and that is because we have this access to the information. We have to learn how to control it. We need to. My other thing I used to say is we have to learn how to use it and shut it off when we don't do it. Because if you don't have this quiet time, if you don't have that place to go where you can dream and think and imagine, create and wonder, we won't get anywhere.
TampaInnovation.com.